was moments away from entering the communal room housing our lockers when a frustrated voice echoed. Patience, Julian, we'll discover it eventually. Who is it? What's with this mysterious man who has you beaming today? I have no idea what you're implying, Julian said. Why does everyone jump to the conclusion that a man is involved? Are you asking for a list? The voice, now recognized as Bethany, one of the cashiers, persisted. First, you've smiled more this morning than during the entire 4 years I've known you. Second, people engage with you and you retreat into your own world, gazing dreamily. Third, you're actually dressed smartly. A fashionable blouse and designer jeans replace your usual casual attire. And look at that, you've left a few buttons undone. Fourth, you flush every time someone inquires about who you've been with for the past 3 days. And last but not least, number 5, you're wearing makeup. Julian, you never apply makeup for work, and it's been 4 years since you last did so. Moreover, your car has remained parked in the lot for 3 consecutive days and nights. Bethany asked bluntly, "Who is he?" I was the one standing at the door, barely opened, because indeed, I was the person she was inquiring about. My thoughts drifted back to those memorable 3 days. It seemed like just 3 days ago that our friendship took a turn into something more meaningful. However, the change had actually begun weeks earlier with a casual phone call. That call came toward the end of my shift. As I prepared to clock out, my department phone rang. "Plumbing department, this is Sam. How may I assist you?" was how I answered as we were trained to do so. "Hey, Sam," it was Julian, the lead cashier. "Are you still getting off at 2:30? She asked. "Yes," I responded. "What's up? Do you have any plans after work?" she continued. "Well, you know us old guys," I quipped. I was intending to take a nap and then mow the lawn, while it seemed Julian was already expressing skepticism. It was all part of our shared humor. Prior to transferring to manage the plumbing department at Marietta, Georgia's store, I had worked for 2 years at Wilson's Home Improvement in North Carolina. On my first day, I was given a tour of the store and introduced to everyone. When I met head cashier Julian, I couldn't help but stare. She was an incredibly beautiful, towering almost 6 feet tall, and remarkably slender girl who appeared to be barely out of high school. Despite my age, 42 at the time, many young people seemed youthful to me. However, this was unusual. "If you're already a head cashier while still in high school," I questioned, "what do you plan to do after graduation?" Julian responded with a slight irritation. "I am actually 22 years old," she replied. Next week, she will turn 23 years old, but this has prompted her to receive comments about her youthful demeanor. In the course of the day, I was in charge of selling discounted vanities that had been damaged. The store's policy lets associates make minor adjustments, but anything reduced by more than 10% necessitated manager or head cashier approval. As a manager, I couldn't perform my own overrides either. I urgently called for a manager or head cashier to the plumbing section through the intercom system. Coincidentally, Julian was the first to answer the call. The customers I was serving watched in astonishment as Julian entered her override code into the computer. "Are you a manager?" the woman asked. To clarify, let me tell you that Julian is one of our head cashiers. I suppose I should elaborate, I added. A nearby junior high school has a work-study program allowing students to earn academic credit by working for local businesses. Julian shrugged dismissively without speaking, but later approached once more. Addressing Gunny, she mentioned, "The senior center phoned. Your transportation to the retirement home arrives in half an hour." She then addressed the couple. "It's been discovered that daily activities help delay the onset of Alzheimer's and similar neurological conditions for seniors at the retirement home. Unfortunately, Gunny joined the program late, so any existing damage cannot be reversed." A round of laughter followed, after which Julian left with a warm smile, unaware that I had noted her 23rd birthday was approaching and managed to discover the exact date by making some inquiries. A grand cake, adorned with pink icing and the message "Sweet 16 Julian" written in large letters, was the order I placed. Regrettably for me, it turned out that Julian, being a fellow Pisces, discovered my birthday was merely 2 days after hers. In response, she prepared a bundt cake with black icing and the phrase "over the hill" emblazoned on its sides. She even found an unusually large black candle approximately 3 inches thick to insert in the bundt cake's hollow center. My intention was to use candles corresponding to my age, but Julian informed everyone that a fire marshal deemed it a potential fire hazard, leaving me with only one candle instead. For the subsequent 2 years, we exchanged playful banter about our ages, with Julian mockingly referring to me as Gramps or Old Man, while I jokingly questioned her high school status and inquired about her future plans. Initially, Julian referred to me as Gunny, then later as Sam. My real name is Samuel L. Johnson, and following a 21-year tenure in the Marine Corps, I retired. During much of that service, my rank was Gunnery Sergeant E7. Consequently, all Marines addressed me as Gunny. Upon leaving the Marine Corps, they asked for any preferred nicknames for my name tag, and I chose Gunny, despite being a Master Sergeant at retirement. I considered it inappropriate to put Master on my name tag, since Master Sergeants are generally called top in the Marine Corps. Moreover, I preferred the nickname Gunny. For most of our 2-year relationship, Julian typically called me Gunny. It was when she wasn't referring to me as Gramps, Old Man, or similar age-related terms. Instead, she began sharing an endless series of Marine Corps jokes. Almost daily, she would share a new joke about how Marines were supposedly clueless. To put it in context, Julian had contacted me around 6 weeks prior, asking if I had any plans after work. After some playful banter about me taking a nap upon arriving home, Julian asked for a favor. "I hate to ask, Gunny," she started, "but my father's microwave conked out. I've already purchased a replacement, but the box is too large for my Mini Cooper. Is there any way you could transport the microwave in your pickup truck and take it to my dad's house?" "Not at all," I replied. After work, I loaded the microwave and Julian joined me in the truck, repeatedly apologizing for the inconvenience and expressing gratitude for my help numerous times. Eventually, I made it clear that there was no need for apologies or thanks. "You aren't troubling me in the least." By that point, I was growing a bit frustrated with the endless apologies. And as for expressing gratitude, it's quite unnecessary, since isn't that what friends are for? I gave her a call and was slightly taken aback by her response when I mentioned friends. Moreover, I commented, "It has been quite some time since I had such an attractive young lady accompanying me." On hearing this, the color in Julian's cheeks deepened significantly. Prior to long, we arrived at her father's house, and I took the microwave inside for her. Julian also presented me to her father, who was wheelchair-bound. I assumed he was in his late 60s, but she later informed me that he was 71. A quick calculation in my mind revealed that her dad must have been 46 when she was born. He started with a broad grin. "You're the one I mean, Julian, who Marine Julian never stops chattering about." If I had suspected Julian blushed deeply in my truck upon my remark about her being a young woman, her current crimson complexion made that initial blush seem mild after hearing her father's words. "Son," she stuttered, "you're mortifying me." Recognizing he had served in the Navy for 28 years, I was aware of the friendly banter between Marines and sailors. Julian's father, Frank Reynolds, had sustained injuries from a helicopter crash, resulting in a fractured spine and a 100% disability rating from the Navy. Not long after, we unpacked the microwave and placed it on the counter. At my agreement, Julian tidied up the house and tossed a load of laundry into the washing machine since we were there. After Frank invited me for a beer, refusing seemed impolite. Meanwhile, Julian was occupied elsewhere in the house. In Frank's living room, we started swapping Navy Marine jokes. When I took a sip from my bottle, Frank suddenly posed a question that left me choking on my drink. Let me tell you, involuntarily swallowing beer isn't exactly a pleasant experience. Serious-faced Frank then inquired about my intentions towards his daughter. "Goodness gracious," I managed to say once I could breathe and speak again. "Don't play jokes when someone is drinking. You nearly gave me a heart attack." "I wasn't joking, Sam," Frank responded. "What are your intentions towards my daughter?" Taken aback, I remained silent for a moment or two. "Frank, I have no idea what you're referring to, I declared. Julian and I are merely colleagues and friends. You asserted that you have no feelings for my daughter, to which I merely nodded, taking a moment to respond. I'll temporarily trust your words that there are no intentions towards my child. However, I must caution you, my daughter does hold some interest in you. In fact, I suspect this is the reason she invited you here today, so we could meet. He continued, "Listen, Frank," I started. "Since you were a retired Navy officer, I'll speak slowly and use simple words. Your remarks triggered me a rude gesture, not a military one, but an obscene one. Julian simply required someone with a pickup truck to transport the microwave over here. And I can guess what you're thinking, so I'll save you the thought. Someone with a pickup truck, a robust physique, and feeble intellect was her need. At 6 feet 2 inches and weighing 215 pounds, I undeniably fit the bill for the strong build part. You won't find that dog bothering me, Frank declared. That dog won't hunt, Frank stated. Here's why. If Julian merely required someone with a pickup truck and a sturdy physique, but an intellect that was less than sharp, she could have summoned either of her brothers instead. Intriguingly, one of her brothers resides less than a quarter-mile away from here and traverses my property en route to his own. Therefore, it would have been equally feasible for her to contact him. Second point. Out of all the years Julian has worked at Wilson's, you are the only friend and colleague she has ever invited to my home and the first man in over 3 years. Third point. Since my son and his wife live nearby, they visit almost daily, helping with chores or throwing laundry in the washer when needed. Julian bringing you here, despite her explanation for wandering around the house, can only imply one thing: she wants me to meet you. She's giving us space to get to know each other. Furthermore, Frank noted, although Julian might not acknowledge it or realize it consciously, I understand my daughter better than anyone else. You may have no romantic feelings for her, but she certainly has the potential. He noted that she was adjusting windage, aligning the crosshairs on your visage. This terminology is familiar to anyone who has served militarily. When readying for a shot, particularly during rifle qualification, one must determine the range and account for windage, the bullet's impact due to wind. For instance, a robust crosswind might cause the bullet to deviate. Crosshairs should be self-explanatory to anyone who has used a rifle scope. As I sat there repeatedly shaking my head, I said, "No." I then told Frank, "Julian is 25, making me 45 and old enough to be her father. It's impossible for someone as young and attractive as Julian to be interested in me. So you do find Julian attractive?" he asked with a chuckle, causing me to blush. I made it clear that merely finding Julian attractive doesn't mean I have any designs on her. Yet I found myself blushing more, Frank stated. "It's important for you to know that my wife is 22 years younger than me, so she might perceive you as a bit too old for her now." Frank chuckled at my discomfort. "Listen, Sam," Frank started. "I don't know when Julian will stop pretending to be busy in the house, but I wanted to share something with you. Or maybe it would be more accurate to say, I want to ask you something." Still taken aback, I gestured for Frank to proceed. "Julian would be furious if she knew I ever told you this, but 3 years ago, she was betrothed," Frank confided quietly. "She fell ill at work due to something she ate and had to leave 5 hours early. Upon reaching the apartment they shared, she discovered her fiancé and her best friend in bed together, just 5 days before their wedding. This incident caused Julian immense distrust towards people since then, as the double betrayal came close to destroying her completely. She sank into depression for nearly a year. It wasn't until a Marine transferred into her store and joked about her age that she began to resemble her old self again." Frank chuckled, recalling their conversation when Julian first shared details about you. Prior to this, whenever they spoke, she typically used only 1 or 2 syllables. However, when she told him your comment about her looking like she was still in high school or even junior high school, she was so enraged that her voice trembled. I could barely suppress my laughter at her recollection of your words, not particularly due to its comedic value, as it was funny indeed, but because for the first time in a year, I felt assured that my daughter was safe. I used to fret over her significantly. Thus, I started sharing Marine Corps jokes with her that she could employ on you. When she narrated about the birthday cake saying, "Sweet 16 Julian," I couldn't suppress my laughter. I can't decide whom she was upset with then, me or you. Initially, whenever she spoke of you, it was always "that dumb Marine" or "that darn stupid jarhead." But over time that transformed into "idiot Marine" or "stupid jarhead," and later simply "Marine" or "jarhead," or even more frequently just "Dunny." For the past 6 months, it has generally been just Sam. Sam, I acknowledge your assertion that you have no intentions for my daughter. I'll agree to that, but kindly, please, show her leniency if that is so. Don't deceive her by feigning affection if you don't, but be gentle with her. She remains quite fragile. After that, we heard Julian call out from the kitchen. I guessed she was asking if we were prepared for another round of beers. Soon after, Julian entered with 3 beers. She gave one to her dad first, then offered me another. They were both seated nearby her dad in a wheelchair with a recliner close by, and an easy chair across from Frank. I was positioned on the end of a long couch, with my left hand and arm resting on the couch's arm. To avoid sitting on my arm, Julian sat down on the couch's edge instead. She then placed her legs over mine and scooted backward until she was pressed against my left bicep. Julian just kept looking at me. As I glanced at Frank, he mimicked shooting a rifle, pointing the imaginary weapon towards me. I gave Frank a gestured one-finger salute with my unseen left hand, mimicking shooting a bird. Not exactly pantomiming, though. "What's been your discussion with Frank?" Julian inquired. "I've simply been expressing to Frank my genuine admiration for the Navy," I responded innocently. "And you expect me to believe that?" She smiled broadly. "Indeed, it's true. The Marines hold the United States Navy in high esteem as the premier, outstanding transportation service. They ferry us where we need to go, feed us, complete our missions, then step aside so we can do our job. Post-mission, they pick us up, patch us up if necessary, and return us home to prepare for the next mission that safeguards life on our planet. The Navy functions similarly to a supercharged taxi service for Marines, drawing laughter from both Julian and Frank. However, Frank made a remark that seemed aimed at me. "Julian, do you know the disparity between the Marines and Boy Scouts? The Boy Scouts have adult guidance." In response to this, I mentioned 2 elderly World War II veterans, a former Navy Master Chief Petty Officer and a former Master Gunnery Sergeant who met at a Veterans Day parade, decided to share some beers, and then engaged in conversation. When the sailor, or Frank, asked the Marine if he had experienced much action during WW2, the Marine revealed that he first landed on Guadalcanal and subsequently participated in amphibious landings at Tinian, Saipan, Peleliu, Kairoa, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa. "Ah, just a brief stint then," replied the sailor, to which I found it hard to believe that an hour could pass so swiftly as Frank, and I exchanged friendly banter and Navamarine humor. At an uncertain moment, Julian took hold of my left hand and settled it on her thigh, with her hand covering mine. Granted, she was clad in blue jeans, yet my hand remained on her thigh. Moreover, at least twice during that hour, I'd glance over at Frank, who seemed to be pretending to fire an imaginary rifle at me. Eventually, Julian and I had to depart. It was only moments after I parked at work where she had left her car, when Julie suggested buying dinner for my help with the microwave. I declined, but she persisted. "All right," I agreed, "but Julian, you are not paying for my meal. Given my military retirement pay and income, I earn more than you do." Since we were still in my vehicle, we drove to a nearby steakhouse and enjoyed an excellent dinner. Somehow, she ended up covering the bill for the meal. Following the second drop-off at her workplace, Julian thanked me repeatedly for assisting with the microwave and unexpectedly gave me a brief hug before hastily departing towards her car. It seemed as though she held back tears after that affectionate gesture. For approximately 6 weeks thereafter, Julian and I enjoyed lunch or dinner on a regular basis. Despite my constant proposals to settle the bill, we alternated payment. The majority of these meals concluded with a hug. Some of these embraces lingered longer than others. Despite my disbelief, someone like Julian could be attracted to someone my age. I must acknowledge that I was genuinely anticipating our meetings, particularly the hugs. Our final meal together proved to be the most impactful. We had concluded eating when, as customary, we shared a hug in the restaurant parking lot. Without much thought, I stooped to kiss Julian, a fleeting lip on her forehead, an action I wasn't fully aware of at first. It wasn't until she leaned back, smiled gently, and inquired, "Why did you do that I began to understand my actions. To my surprise, instead of reprimand, she pulled me close and returned the kiss. "Now we're even," she said with a smile, "and now there's no need for apologies." She then got into her car, drove off, and waved goodbye with the broadest grin I had ever seen on her face. I remained standing in the parking lot, trying to comprehend what had transpired. At some point, I touched my lips with my fingers, still a bit dazed. Eventually, I climbed into my truck and drove home, though I barely recall the journey. The sole focus of my thoughts was the remarkable softness of Julian's lips. Our new stage in our relationship commenced merely 3 days prior, under extremely unfavorable conditions that made me so enraged I was prepared to confront my younger brother in the most literal sense. Had my little brother been present when I learned about his betrayal towards Julian, it's hard to predict what could have transpired. Before delving into that, let me clarify some aspects about Wilson's home improvement. The firm operates on a series of rotating schedules where responsibilities are allocated to employees based on their roles. For instance, Schedule A might consist of one head cashier, 4 or 5 cashiers, the plumbing, flooring, front end, and millwork managers, in addition to the sales specialist for the seasonal department. Schedule B may encompass an additional head cashier and cashiers, along with managers for appliances, gardening, lumber, and construction materials, and a flooring and plumbing specialist. Schedule C might comprise another group of head cashier and cashiers, together with managers for paint, hardware, seasonal items, electrical goods, and an appliance sales specialist. Different departments didn't always have a sales specialist, and some had too, but they were always scheduled on distinct rotations. Each of the 3 schedules functioned on separate weekly rotations. For example, during week 1, employees on Schedule A could open on Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, be off Tuesday and Wednesday, then work mid-shifts Thursday and Friday. Week 2 might have them working mid-shifts over the weekend, taking off Monday and Tuesday, and closing Wednesday through Friday. Week 3 could grant them the weekend off, followed by opening on Monday and Tuesday, working mid-shifts on Wednesday and Thursday, and closing on Friday. The objective was to ensure that at least 4 department managers were available for both opening and closing shifts, with assistant store managers working distinct schedules. During busy periods, as many as 7 or 8 managers might be present. Julian and I were on Schedule A, meaning we typically worked the same hours. While flexibility was necessary due to vacations or unforeseen absences, most weeks found us scheduled together. With a new rotation beginning for Schedule A, Julian and I had previously opened the store over the weekend. On Monday, my shift began at 5:30 am. The benefit was having the following 2 days off. Upon arriving in the nearly empty parking lot that morning, I noticed a car parked next to my usual spot. After turning off my headlights and engine, I prepared to exit when I saw Julian approaching. "Stay outside, Sam," she said. "Please, stay outside," she repeated, her voice quivering on the verge of tears. "Why are you crying, Julian?" I inquired, to which she began to weep. "Oh no," she lamented. "You're going to despise me. You're going to detest me and refuse to communicate with me ever again, or even look at me." "I won't hate you, Julian," I responded, attempting to console her. "Simply tell me what transpired." "It was my tongue that got me into trouble this time," she sobbed. "That's what happened. It wasn't intentional, it just came out." After many tears and repeated promises that I didn't dislike her and definitely wouldn't harm her, she finally disclosed the truth. "Your younger brother had misplaced his phone, losing it in the ocean while fishing. Since your number was saved in his phone and he had no other way to reach me, he contacted the store. Julian had been set to finish work at the same time as I on Sunday, but another head cashier had called out, causing her to work a few extra hours. This is how she ended up answering your brother's call. My sibling, recently advanced to the rank of major in the Marines, rang to taunt me and discuss his promotion, along with other topics. He also wanted to catch up as we hadn't spoken in months. Julian couldn't disclose my personal number without consent, so she took a message, promising to deliver it on Monday. During their conversation, John inquired about my well-being, stating that I appeared close to him. He then asked directly if I was dating currently. Taken aback, Julian responded honestly but cautiously, mentioning that I rarely shared personal details and had never mentioned a romantic partner. John then reminded her of my late spouse, to which she confirmed that she'd heard about my wife who had passed away from cancer a few years prior. Approximately 6 years passed, John mentioned, and to my understanding, he has likely gone on fewer than 5 dates since then. Julian disclosed she inquired about my deceased wife, as I usually diverted discussions regarding her. John shared my wife's name and detailed our brief 4-year marriage before her passing. The words that haunted me followed. Did you know she was a Sports Illustrated swimsuit model? Julian divulged that upon sharing this information with me, even under the soft parking lot lights, I paled like a ghost. She described my subsequent collapse against my vehicle. If my brother had been there at that instant, I can't say what I would have done, but it likely wouldn't have been composed or polite. I barely recall the following minutes, only that Julian was embracing me tightly, weeping once more, and expressing her apologies. "I'm so sorry, Sam." "I'm terribly sorry," she repeated, "and now the entire store is aware, all due to my carelessness." My return to the present was prompted by these words as I gently disentangled myself from Julian. "Did you tell everyone?" I inquired. "Perhaps more forcefully than intended," she responded. "No, Sam," she quickly assured me. "I would never do that. Please trust me on this." She only repeated what John told her. It turns out that Janie was standing beside me and overheard everything. The moment the information reached her, the entire store became privy to it. Julian sighed, "And as you're aware, if Janie hears something, the news will spread from the store to the city, county, and likely the state in a matter of minutes." Within moments, Janie began searching for your name on her phone, and within half an hour, everyone in the store knew about it. Checking my watch, I recognized it was close to 6 a.m., making me 30 minutes tardy for work, an uncharacteristic mishap for a Marine. However, given the circumstances, I couldn't bring myself to work today. The sympathetic glances, uncomfortable queries, and speculation about who had been perusing her photographs online were too much to bear. Although my wife's modeling career never troubled me when she was alive, in fact, I took pride in it. The thought of people scrutinizing her pictures after her passing was unbearable. I was about to inform Julian of my intention to call out, but she interjected softly, "Already taken care of, Sam." She had contacted our store manager, Clinton, and explained the situation. He understood the difficulty I was experiencing and even offered several extra days off if required. I suggested to Julian that I only wished to return home, yet she persisted in offering a cup of coffee. She indicated the nearby IHOP. I emphasized it wasn't needed, expressing I merely desired solitude. Somehow, we ended up at IHOP, sipping coffee 10 minutes later, due to her determination and, "If you won't even let me buy you coffee, it seems you really dislike me." Admittedly, I've always felt a soft spot regarding women's emotions. I hadn't realized it then, but as she got into my truck, Julian was wearing shorts, revealing her toned, tanned legs, something I couldn't help but notice. "Do you like what you see?" she asked, catching me off guard, to which I quickly averted my gaze. I remained silent on the matter. Upon reaching IHOP, she remained in the truck, awaiting me as I opened the door, providing another opportunity to admire her legs. Her walk ahead of me into the restaurant was hard to ignore, particularly given how fitted her shorts were and how endearing her stride was. Once seated with coffees, she looked at me gravely and inquired, "Shall we discuss Lauren?" The mere mention of her name from another's lips, or my own, brought a sudden rush. I had not uttered that name aloud for years. Upon saying it, Lauren, a flood of long suppressed pain washed over me. Julian appeared to notice my distress, reaching across the table to soothe my hand gently. "I'm sorry, Sam," she murmured. "I didn't intend to revive that pain." "It wasn't your fault, Julian," I replied. She whispered, "It's been such a long time since I've mentioned her name to anyone, and just saying it seems to cause you so much pain." She suggested gently, "Perhaps it's time to discuss her." My reply was harsher than intended. "Thank you for your concern," I began, my voice gruff. Julian interjected swiftly. "A wise man once said thanks aren't necessary between friends," she said, then added, "and I consider you a close friend." This took me aback. My cheeks grew warm again, this time from surprise. "I don't quite know what to say, Julian," I confessed, "but I'd rather not talk about Lauren. Not anymore. Not at this moment." Yet, minutes later, I found myself doing just that. I began recounting how Lauren differed from the stereotypical diva often associated with modeling. Her parents ran a small family-owned hotel. Since childhood, Lauren participated in tasks such as sweeping, vacuuming, scrubbing bathtubs, folding linens, making beds, before and after school every summer. She could handle running the front desk, taking reservations, cooking meals, cleaning rooms, you name it. This experience instilled in her a deep respect for hard work and made her treat everyone with kindness and consideration. Julian inquired about how we had become acquainted. Admittedly, it was painful. Yet, there was a sense of solace in reminiscing about her and sharing these memories with a friend. While discussing, I clarified that our magazine wasn't solely focused on photographing models on tropical beaches. We also organized shoots at military bases, Navy, Army, Air Force, and the Marine Corps. The Marine Corps shoot was scheduled at Camp Lejeune, where I was stationed. Previously, all other locations, including every beach shoot, had already been finalized. Upon meeting with representatives from the magazine at Camp Lejeune, they expressed interest in obtaining access to various military vehicles, including Humvees, tanks, helicopters, and two vertical takeoff aircraft, the Osprey and the Harrier. This prompted the commanding general to summon my superior, who subsequently called me. As the NCO of the motor pool, I couldn't assist with the aircraft, but when Julian showed a puzzled expression, I clarified that NCO stands for Non-Commissioned Officer in Charge. I assured them I could provide any other necessary vehicles. To prevent overburdening the junior enlisted men with the distraction of attractive women in revealing swimsuits, I volunteered to manage this specific task myself, adding a smile as I did so. I soon discovered that modeling was more challenging and complex than it appeared from the outside. 6:58 and marked the sunrise on the initial day, prompting photographers to arrive early for capturing the soft light. Hence, models were required to show up as early as 4 a.m. with a team of makeup artists, hairstylists, wardrobe specialists, and others forming an entourage numbering approximately 60 individuals, excluding Marines like myself. The process took 3 hours for hairstyling and multiple swimsuit changes to achieve the desired look. That day, I first laid eyes on Lauren and found myself speechless as memories flooded me. It wasn't until 5 minutes had passed that I realized I hadn't spoken a word. Julian simply smiled at me, commenting on my composed, serene, and joyful demeanor. The extraordinary aspect of Lauren was her ordinary appearance when not modeling. She retained her beauty, yet her true extraordinary nature wasn't immediately apparent. I started by saying this. When she assumed what she termed modeling mode, she referred to it as modeling with flair. She was breathtakingly beautiful. However, when casually around, she could easily be missed. She faded into the background. The first time I saw Lauren, she hadn't applied any makeup. Her hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail, and she wore old blue jeans and a worn-out blouse. It was near 4 a.m. when this pretty girl walked up, carrying 10 boxes of donuts, trailed by a taxi driver with another 10. I later discovered she had ordered 20 dozens the night before. She began distributing them, greeting everyone by name. Unlike the other models who remained aloof and distant, Lauren was distinct. When she was down to 3 boxes, she approached me. "These are for your officers, Sergeant," she said. Yes, Miss Lauren, I responded. She arched an eyebrow, fixed me with a stern gaze, and stated, "My name is Lauren. Using ma'am makes me feel like an elderly, spinsterish woman." I scrutinized her gradually until I detected a hint of annoyance. Then I replied, "Understood, Miss Lauren, although you could hardly be confused for an elderly spinster. You seem no older than 60 at most." Julian gasped and exclaimed, "Why do you always comment on women's ages? It's like you want to choke me when you tell me I resemble a high school student or even a junior high student, but you actually told a supermodel she doesn't look a day over 60. I grinned and nodded. Granted, I wasn't aware she was a model. I merely assumed she was an assistant or perhaps a writer for the magazine. Yet, you should have seen her expression, I chuckled. Lauren seemed like she wanted to murder me, I added with amusement. If glares could kill, I'd be dead by now. Ultimately, I couldn't restrain myself and began laughing. After a short while, Lauren chuckled alongside. "Ha, ha, quite amusing, Sergeant," she replied. "You got me." Then she continued, "I must say, I was taken aback when they summoned all the models for makeup and styling." I moved closer and took a seat next to her. "Interestingly enough, I mentioned to Julian that you bear some resemblance to her." "Me," Julian responded skeptically. "I don't see it at all." "It's not an exact match," I explained. "You share the same red hair and green eyes as Lauren did, blue-haired and eyed she was. You are also taller, slightly taller than her, and slender like she was. Both of you possess striking, captivating eyes. However, it's not just your physical features that are similar. You both have a unique sense of humor and unyielding honesty. Neither of you is reluctant to express your thoughts or put me in my place when necessary." I added, "Oh, and one more thing, you're quite beautiful." Julian turned crimson with embarrassment. After spending some time together, Lauren once confessed that she didn't comprehend why people wanted her to model. She often expressed she wasn't particularly well built, she'd say. "She had far more than I do," Julian muttered, then reddened when she realized she'd spoken aloud, revealing possibly her knowledge of some of Lauren's photos. Pretending not to notice, I continued. Following 3 hours with a makeup and hair cruise, Lauren approached where I was standing. The change was astounding. "Well, Sergeant," she inquired, "do I appear any younger now?" "Amazingly," I replied. "You do, ma'am. You look at least a decade younger." I feared she might strike me, I informed Julian. That platoon was the last military base for our magazine shoot. It seemed the folks from other bases, especially those in the Navy, had warned her about the Marines. By then, she was getting quite accustomed to military ranks. After giving me a prolonged stare, Lauren sweetened her expression and inquired about the stripes on my arm. "Are you a chief petty officer?" The day proceeded with her questioning me about why I chose to join the Marines rather than the Air Force or Navy, and addressing me with various military ranks other than gunnery sergeant. Our banter was amusing. As filming concluded around 5 p.m., I invited Lauren to dinner, not anticipating a positive response. Yet, she inquired about good steak restaurants nearby, and we dined at one of my favorites. We engaged in silent conversation for an hour and a half during dinner. Then, Lauren questioned whether I danced. "Do you?" I disclosed. "I haven't danced since my teenage years and have no intention of starting now." However, 30 minutes later, we were at a nightclub dancing. Fortunately, the initial dance was slow, allowing me to follow Lauren's lead with some learned steps, resulting in our extended stay for nearly 2 hours. By then, it was about 9 p.m., and Lauren had been awake since roughly 3:30 that morning. Recognizing her exhaustion, she asked if I could drive her back to her hotel, a request I happily granted. Upon arrival, I parked and escorted her into the lobby. Lauren thanked me for dinner and dancing, then surprised me with a hug before uttering, "What the heck?" After a long day's shoot scheduled to commence at 9 a.m. We dined together again, Italian cuisine this time. Our conversation continued for another 2 hours before hitting the dance floor once more. As I dropped her off at the hotel, Lauren hugged me, again exclaiming, "What the heck?" followed by a sweet kiss on the cheek. The next day's shooting was scheduled for 9 a.m. So we all arrived at 6 am. However, it poured rain that morning, necessitating an early start. Once more, I invited Lauren to dinner, but this time, our discussion and dancing continued late into the night. When I dropped her off at the hotel, she hugged me again before saying, "What the heck?" and planting a kiss on my cheek. Shooting was set for the following day at 9 am, so we assembled at 6 am as planned. At 9, despite persistent daily rain forecasts, the event was canceled. I suggested to Lauren that we head to the beach for some afternoon sun. She seemed puzzled and replied, "Haven't you been listening? It's supposed to rain all day." Unbeknownst to Lauren, I had contacted a meteorologist friend at the Marine Corps Air Station in Cherry Point. He informed me the rain would cease around 11:30, and by noon, the sun would shine brightly, although the day might be breezy. Another friend, a fishing boat captain with over 40 years of experience, corroborated this. Upon mentioning the Marine hymn to Lauren, she recognized it. I said, "From the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli." Julian acknowledged it too. I clarified that there were indeed 3 verses, with the third concluding as, "If the Army and Navy ever gaze upon heaven's sights, they will find that streets are patrolled by United States Marines." Turning to Julian with a broad smile, I continued narrating. I mentioned to Lauren, "Given that we safeguard heaven's streets, God frequently fulfills particular requests for Marines." Then I requested a bright and pleasant afternoon to spend with an attractive, but more mature woman, stressing the word more mature. I then added, and God responded, "You have it." Lauren seemed rather puzzled by my actions. "How old was Lauren when we first met?" Julian inquired. "She was 25, I was 34. I answered. "Regardless," I said, continuing my narrative, "I wagered with Lauren that the rain would cease and the sun would shine around noon." "If I'm foolish enough to make such a bet," Lauren queried, "what are we gambling in this case?" I told her. "A day at the beach and a kiss." "You asked what my wager would be. I'll inform you after I've won," she replied. At around 11:30, the rain ceased, and by 12:30, we were at the closest beach. The length of time that elapsed before Julian murmured, "Sam," isn't clear. Sam. Catching sight of me, Julian was smiling, and I understood with a momentary jolt she had my hand in hers. "You seem lost again, Sam," she said softly, "but I've never seen such a radiant smile on your face." "Apologies, Jules," I said reflexively, and immediately noticed the stunned expression on her face. I recognized my mistake in addressing her by that name. "I'm sorry, Julian," I said swiftly. "I don't know why I called you that." "It's all right, Sam," she breathed. Nearly convinced, I thought I saw a shimmer in her eyes. My mother had often called me Jules before her voice faded away. Julian once mentioned to me that her mother died in a car crash. She hadn't been called that since, but she hinted she'd be fine if you addressed her as Jules. She nudged me to recall that our story paused just when Lauren and I reached the beach. Following our meticulous morning bed-making, we indulged in a lengthy breakfast together. Later, I dropped her off at the hotel, waiting in the lobby until she was ready to return. When she did, she wore a short pair of shorts and a t-shirt. She mentioned her swimsuit was beneath, though she joked that she wouldn't need a bikini due to the impending rain. Still evasive about her wager, she asserted she owed the bed fee, but wouldn't disclose her conditions if she won. As we neared the beach, despite the wind, the sun shone brightly. Lauren strolled onto the sand, discarding her t-shirt and shorts. A strong breeze swept past, scattering her hair behind her. In those moments, I recognized that despite our brief acquaintance, I was in love with Lauren. Verbalizing it aloud seemed to transport me back into the recesses of my memory or cause a mental lapse, as Julian often called it. I returned just in time to hear Julian quietly remark, "I'm certain I could remove my top at the beach without anyone noticing." Earlier, Julian had commented that Lauren was perplexed about why people wanted her to model given her lack of confidence in her body image. Julian had quipped something about Lauren having far more than she did. This wasn't the first instance of such a comment from Julian. At our regular dinners, I had observed Julian scrutinizing women with well-endowed figures and murmuring phrases like, I wonder what it feels like to have so much on top. Until now, I had disregarded her remarks. But this time I intervened, saying firmly, Julian, cease. Stop. 5 days before our wedding, you found my fiancé with my best friend. I confronted him, asking why he would do such a thing. He mentioned that my former friend had a larger chest, and that's what attracted him. I tried to explain using an old Southern saying, it's not the size of the fight in the dog, but the size of the dog in the fight. However, you seemed to misunderstand and took offense, feeling compared to a dog due to my smaller chest size. You playfully used the phrase Marine Corps way, upon which I felt it appropriate to give Julian the glare I perfected during my years as a drill instructor at Parris Island's Marine Corps Boot Camp in South Carolina. Known for reducing new recruits to tears, this glare could still make privates and lance corporals quiver. Even some sergeants weren't exempt. After a minute of delivering the glare, Julian simply asked me, "Are you constipated? Do you need to use the bathroom?" Taken aback, I was momentarily speechless. This was the first time my glare had ever been ineffective. By now, Julian was laughing uncontrollably. "Sam, dear Sam," she chuckled, "seems like you've forgotten that my father is a retired Navy Master Chief Petty Officer. While your gaze is more forceful than his, I've been on the receiving end of his death stare. My siblings continue to fear it, as I did for years, but now I merely chuckle when Dad attempts such antics on me. And Sam, do you comprehend that in less than an hour, I've morphed from Julian to Jules? You addressed me as honey mere moments ago. I was about to deny having said that, but then remembered, a bit too late, I had indeed. I shut my mouth again. After some time, with Jules grinning at me, I attempted to clarify my actions in my unique way. In a teasing Marine Corps tone, she interrupted. "I was attempting to make a point," I said. "Men are drawn to swift, eye-catching cars. Men follow trends. Men focus on appearances. But real men value a reliable car over a flashy one. Real men understand that trends change. And real men know there's more to a woman than just her looks. What truly matters is her soul." I paused. Most men understand that physical appearance isn't a measure of intimacy. It's the emotional bond that truly counts. Jules chuckled slightly and playfully started to undo her blouse. "I don't have an undershirt on, by the way," she quipped, testing my theory. I swiftly moved my hand across the table to gently take hers. "Let's maintain a level of respect," I replied. As I watched Lauren at the beach, I admitted, I found myself falling in love with her. I was stationed behind her as she gazed out over the ocean. I've always paid attention to body language, the way someone carries themselves, their movements, they speak volumes. Jules smirked knowingly. "So, you were definitely ogling her then?" A blush rose to my cheeks. I couldn't help but admire her poise. The sun shining on her hair and her serene expression, it all touched me deeply. After approximately 2 hours of enjoying the water and sun, Lauren inquired about the timeline for my promised farewell kiss. I was reclining on my back while she was lying stomach down, observing the waves. Eyebrow raised subtly by Jules, I hesitated before responding. I acknowledged my developing feelings towards her, but also recognized her as someone respected and accomplished. I, being a small-town resident with an ordinary job, couldn't fathom someone like her falling for someone like me. Jules tilted her head slightly, and then we exchanged a kiss. Smiling, I shared that I was saving it for a particularly memorable goodbye. She elevated herself on one elbow, gazed intently into my eyes, and declared her dislike of goodbye kisses. Instead, she leaned towards me and murmured her preference for welcome kisses. And so we kissed, continued to kiss, and kept on kissing. I hesitated once more, unsure of what to do next. Just when I thought it couldn't get any better, Lauren looked around to confirm the beach was still deserted. She removed her upper garment, and we engaged in an incredibly intimate moment for the first time, right on the blanket. Perhaps I fell asleep amidst my reminiscence. For the next instant, Julian was tenderly removing tears from my face. I hadn't intended to reveal so much, not to Julian, not to anyone. It was intensely personal. Yet, as I began speaking, the words seemed to flow involuntarily. "I'm sorry, Jules," I murmured quietly. I didn't fully comprehend what my lips were saying. "Don't apologize, Sam," she replied. "That was one of the most beautiful things I've ever heard." Then she questioned, "Did Lauren ever disclose her wager? What you would have had to do if it had kept raining?" "Yes," I responded after a moment. "I eventually inquired about it. She explained that she didn't want me to misinterpret the situation. She clarified that she wasn't casual about intimacy. In fact, she disclosed that I was the first person she had been with in nearly 2 years. She smiled and replied, 'Had I won the wager, we'd have been in your hotel room for a couple of hours by now, and our moment might have been our third or fourth encounter.'" Julian wanted to know what occurred next, so I shared that Lauren mentioned her photo shoot was not until another week and a half in Milan, Italy. She wished to spend that time with me. The following day, I applied for leave. Since the photo shoot had gone well, it was approved promptly. The magazine informed my superiors it had been one of their best experiences on any base. The models were content, and for a brief moment, I was blameless. I told Julian that Lauren and I took day trips to Raleigh, Wilmington, and a few other nearby locations. We also spent 2 nights in Asheville, touring the Biltmore estate. "So, when and how did you propose to her?" Julian asked. I replied, "We had only 2 days left before Lauren departed for Italy. One evening, she shared her intention to model for merely 5 more years, and by the age of 30, she intended to retire. Curiously, I inquired about the reason. Lauren responded, saying time and tide wait for no one. Likewise, neither does time and aging affect everyone equally. Fortunately, that's not a concern for me," Julian murmured softly. I was about to reprimand her for self-deprecation again, but she interrupted. "Come on, Sam," she said with a gentle smile. "I'm simply stating facts, not necessarily expressing disappointment." Afterward, Jules smiled again and requested that I avoid comparing her to a dog once more. We both laughed, and the conversation continued. Lauren disclosed her desire to stop modeling when companies began paying her not to. She went on to describe the wonderful past week and a half she'd had, expressing her joy and wishing to marry me. Moreover, she expressed a longing to start a family with me, many children. "Wait, did you propose to Lauren?" Julian asked incredulously. To put it simply, by the end of that night, we were engaged. The following day, we purchased an engagement ring and set a wedding date. 2 months later, we exchanged vows. In silence, I remained for several minutes. 6 months prior to her intended retirement, a routine test produced surprising findings. By the time we discovered she had cervical cancer, it had already metastasized. A single month remained before her 30th birthday, a month before we were due to start our family. She was no more. This time, my cheeks held more than just a few tears for Julian to wipe away. Hers joined them as well. Upon glancing at my watch, I realized with shock that Julian and I had spent over 2 hours at IHOP. It was slightly after 8 a.m. I withdrew a $20 bill and left it on the table to cover our coffee and refills. I supposed it was time for me to depart. "What do we have planned for the rest of the day?" Julian inquired. At first, I failed to perceive she had used "we." I intended to journey to Helen and stay overnight. Initially, I mentioned I might leave for a couple of nights, but then you spoke up. "What was that? You said we, correct?" "Well, everything today is your fault. If you're planning to drive to Helen, I'm coming along. This is Jules. I made it clear there is no we. You have no place with me. I insist, and you're not joining me." "Fine, if that's what you want," she replied quietly. "Still, it seems excessive to travel in 2 cars to Helen." I stood silent for a moment, considering giving her the usual glare, but decided to save my energy. So I asserted forcefully, "I'm driving to Helen alone." "You are not accompanying me. You are not going to Helen. You are not even heading towards Helen. Let that be clear. Young lady, we set off for Helen 15 minutes later. Don't inquire about how that happened. Multiple times, I informed Julian that she would occupy a different hotel room from mine, but my persuasion failed again. I insisted on having her in a distinct room, but alas, another defeat. If you're curious, even that wasn't granted. With my phone in hand, I dialed the hotel's general manager, Bobby. "Hi, Bobby," I said upon his response. "I'll be reaching there soon as I'm on my way already. Unexpected events have brought a companion with me." "What? Explain." "Indeed, it's a female companion." "What?" "Yes, she is over 15. "What?" "At this point, we're still figuring that out," I said, hinting at her mental stability. Julian was smirking at me from the corner of my eye. "The purpose of my call, Bobby, is to ask if you have a more luxurious room with separate beds." "Excellent. What's that now, Bobby? You aren't under the impression I know the owners, are you?" "Not at all. I don't require one of those back-tying coat styles either. Farewell, friend. I habitually keep an emergency bag in my vehicle." To my surprise, Julian also had one stowed away in her car. Before our departure, I had to drive her back to her car. She made me hand over my keys before she'd step out of the truck to get her bag. It seemed as if she didn't trust me to leave while she was retrieving it. I hadn't even contemplated such an act. Well, not genuinely. To clarify, Helen is located several hours north of Marietta, Georgia. Unbeknownst to some, it's a quaint town modeled after a typical Bavarian village. It's my preferred escape whenever I have time off work. "Ever been to Helen before?" I inquired from Julian. "Not since I was around 15, she responded. "My mother adored the place. We frequented it at least 3 or 4 times a year. Following her death in that traffic mishap, it was unbearably distressing for my father. I eagerly anticipate recalling more details." As we drew nearer, Julian seemed increasingly elated. Upon entering the town, she began identifying landmarks. "Ah, I recollect this. That's exactly the same. Or wow, that's changed drastically now." I parked at the hotel and suggested to Julian, "Let's proceed with check-in. Then we can explore the town." Upon entering, my friend Bobby was at the reception desk. "Hello, Sam," he greeted, shaking my hand. To my utter astonishment, he added, "You must be Julian." I had no idea how he knew her name. I didn't recall telling him. I simply mentioned bringing a companion. "And here are the keys to Suite 1A. "Suite 1A, I exclaimed. "Suite 1A has 2 separate beds." "No, Sam," Julian said softly. "Suite 1A, also known as the honeymoon suite, doesn't have 2 separate beds. The room has a queen-sized bed and includes a hot tub, as Bobby updated the reservation despite not visiting Helen's since adolescence. You had stopped for gas where you left your phone in the truck, which Julian used to call and make the change. When she mentioned the honeymoon suite and the presence of a hot tub, it became clear that the accommodation was intended to be an exceptional one with just one bed, causing Julian to blush deeply. Bob sported a grin reminiscent of lottery winners. The other clerk shared the same exuberant expression. Julian's face, however, conveyed apprehension regarding my reaction. "Julian," I began, but was interrupted. "Don't you want to avoid another disagreement?" she queried with a tentative smile. I attempted a serious demeanor, but failed miserably, unable to suppress my grin. "No, dear one," I replied. "What I intended to say was that while today and tonight might suffice for the first 6 times, you'll need tomorrow to recuperate. The youth of your years may not match our endurance as seasoned adults." Upon hearing this, Julian threw her arms around me, and we shared a kiss, our first real one, although it was technically our third if you count that kiss on the forehead. Our moment deepened, but Julian abruptly broke away and turned to Bobby. "Bobby," she queried with a playful smirk, "do you know anywhere locally that rents walking aids? Seems someone might need one tomorrow. Let's find out, Sam." "I am Lauren's brother," Bobby clarified as Julian was about to shake his hand. "Yesterday, when we spoke of your late wife, I informed her that Lauren has only one other relative, a brother." Julian then shook hands with Bobby. Turning to me, she asked, "So, you were the I know the owner you were threatening Bobby with yesterday?" "Indeed," I affirmed. "I had planned on telling you today. This fellow," pointing at Bobby, "and I are co-owners and brothers-in-law. In fact, Bobby and I, despite his occasional unruly nature, are friends. We both even participate in different veterans organizations. Were you also a Marine, Bobby? I chuckled. Bobby? A Marine? Each military branch has its own battle cry. The Marines say "Ora," the Army uses "Hua," and the Navy yells "Huya." The Air Force's version is "Nice pot." Bobby gave me a curious look. He was in the Air Force, I clarified. Just one of many witty jokes the other branches like to throw at the Air Force. Sam is just envious, Julian joked. For instance, it's a well-known fact that since the Air Force became its own branch in 1947, there hasn't been a single successful invasion of NES golf course, public or private. Bobby went on to share that he had even tried to join the Marines, but his papers were ready and he was about to leave for boot camp when the Marines discovered an unusual detail: his parents weren't related and were legally married. He could have gotten a waiver for either condition, but not both. That's a story I need to share with my dad, Julian chuckled. Your dad? Bobby asked. My dad is a retired Navy, she explained. Bobby remarked with a smile, if you strategize well and leave that man there, indicating himself, I could possibly divorce my wife and wed you instead. Just as you were about to retort, an unexpected intrusion saved Bobby. The door to his office burst open, and a sizable woman stormed in. You're aware that I stand at around 6 feet 2 inches tall and weigh approximately 215 pounds. Bobby towers at nearly 6 feet 5 inches, yet likely doesn't exceed 180 pounds. I frequently tease him by comparing him to Abraham Lincoln, tall, slender, and hardly fashion model material. However, it's all in jest, as Bobby is quite handsome. His wife, Susan, is of equal height and weighs close to 300 pounds. Pretending not to see either of us, she entered the room, feigning ignorance. Oh, Bobby, she declared dramatically, we need to address soundproofing some of these rooms. Many guests have been expressing their discomfort due to the loud noises emanating from the honeymoon suite last night. Indeed, Julian was quite vocal, more so than I had anticipated. The noise seemed to resonate through the walls, surprising me. If I thought Julian was blushing before, her current shade of red surpassed that. Susan then turned to us as if she hadn't noticed our presence until now. Ah, she said sweetly, you must be new guests. What rooms are you staying in? Julian flushed even deeper, if that were possible. I apologize, she murmured. I couldn't help but laugh, and soon Bobby and Susan joined me. It was unclear whether Julian's redness stemmed from embarrassment or anger. After my laughter subsided, she was glaring at all of us. I'm sorry, dear, I said, still chuckling. This woman, I gestured towards Susan, is Bobby's wife. Friend Susan, this is my cherished companion, Julian. The phrase seemed to ease the frown slightly. Friend Susan is humorously nicknamed as the Bride of Frankenstein among our group. This comment elicited a friendly gesture from her. And if it helps your feelings, let me tell you what she did when we first met, I said to Julian. Bobby and Susan both burst into laughter. On the day before my wedding to Lauren, I encountered them in New York. Upon opening the door, there stood Susan, who immediately told me I needed to abandon this thin woman I was about to marry and find someone with some real substance to keep me warm at night, someone like her. This was said in the presence of her husband and my fiancé, I added. She then continued for a full 10 minutes discussing what she would do to me and what she wanted me to do to her. By now, Julian was laughing too. What happened next? She asked. I turned even more colors than you just did, I replied. Lauren found it amusing. My initial meeting with my future in-laws, Bobby commented, but he certainly paid him back later. I need to hear this, Julian stated. This man, Susan indicated, pointing at me, approached me and asked if I knew who Johnny Cash was. Yes, I do, Julian responded. My father often listens to country music. He inquired if I was the person that Johnny Cash wrote that song about, Susan continued. I wondered what song he was referring to, I added, and what he was talking about. Then he smiled and said, You know the song A Boy Named Sue? I told her, I wish I had met you before this surgery. It seems like you would have been quite entertaining back then. Bobby remarked after 20 years of marriage, this is the first time I've seen her speechless. he added, laughing. Unfortunately, it was also the last time. Put it away, Bobby, Susan retorted playfully. We all laughed. Then I recalled what Bobby had said before Susan entered. Hey, Susan, I started. Prior to your arrival, Bobby informed Julian that if she abandoned me, he'd divorce you and wed her instead. What? Susan responded. In such a scenario, the honeymoon suite would only echo with laughter. Julian just revealed that her father is a retired Navy officer, Bobby continued. So how does he feel about you being here with a Marine? Frankly, he's unaware of it, Julian disclosed. In essence, Sam forced me into his truck. He wouldn't let me escape, despite my persistent pleas. Forced? I queried, raising an eyebrow. I merely prevented you from leaving the truck yesterday. Don't trust him, Julian cautioned Bobby and Susan. By the way, it seems my father has come to terms with my fate of remaining a spinster, and the choices are dwindling. And while a Marine might not be the ideal match, the Navy does have a motto, and he proceeded to share it. I find myself drawn to her, I said, smiling. Bobby chuckled. Susan, shall we adopt her? She's adorable. Julian continued, I believe my father will concur. Although dating a Marine isn't my first choice, it's not the worst scenario. The worst would have been someone from the Coast Guard, and even worse than that, someone from the Air Force. As a Navy brat, Julian was accustomed to the playful banter between military branches. That's harsh, Bobby exclaimed. The Air Force is worse than the Coast Guard, worse than the shallow water Navy. Julian smirked self-satisfiedly. However, Susan seemed perplexed. The what Navy? Clarified Bobby. The shallow water Navy, I explained, the joke being that the Coast Guard never ventures to places they can't see land, and all their recruits are rumored to be 6 feet tall. So if their boat sinks, they can just walk back to shore, I added. And a long-term deployment means spending the night on the ship. Bobby nodded, smiling. Regarding the Coast Guard, neither of us is lenient about their challenging duties. Hence, Bobby faced me, inquiring about our encounter with Julian. Recount the tale of your acquaintance with her, he said. To which, before I could respond, Julian interjected, narrating how we crossed paths since we were colleagues at the same firm, and she assisted during my first day post-transfer from another branch. She recounted how I teased her about her youthful appearance, even implying she was part of a junior high work-study program. What's your fascination with estimating women's ages, Sam? Susan inquired, mirroring Julian's earlier comment. Lauren shared her annoyance over your comment suggesting she seemed younger than 60. I simply shrugged, unsure of how to react. Soon enough, Bobby and Julian started exchanging Marine Corps jokes, as if I was not even present. Hey, Bobby, said Julian, did you hear about the ex-soldier who applied for a high-paying job? He was asked math questions by the boss, and he got the answer wrong for 3 times 7. Turns out, he was offered the job anyway. They said the other applicants were former Marines, making him the closest fit. Wow, Julian exclaimed, to which Bobby responded, once he regained his breath from laughing, where have you been all my life? Susan almost collapsed with laughter, but I could only muster a wince. Double ouch, Julian replied, looking at me mockingly. You understand, Sam, that I'm actually a few years elder than Bobby. That's fine, Sam. My father often notes that Marines never truly grow old. They merely don't mature. I found your response amusing. Apparently, my father didn't just say something nice about Marines. He said something accurate. By now, Susan was almost in tears from laughing so much. Julian, she gasped when she could finally breathe. If this naive soldier doesn't wed you soon, Bobby and I will take you as our own. You can move in with us and manage the hotel. Hold on a moment, I interjected before things escalated further. Allow me to address that joke of yours, Julian. Firstly, there is no such thing as an ex-Marine. The saying goes, once a Marine, always a Marine. Impressive, Julian quipped, echoing her father's wisdom. She wasn't maturing, I implied through a feigned glare, but she responded with an overly innocent smile. Bobby and Susan could no longer stifle their laughter. And secondly, I added, when it comes to tackling any kind of issue, including math, All Marines are aware that the correct approach is judicious use of C4. What issue? Bobby questioned. Which careful application? Julian echoed, seeming surprised. You must have spent a considerable amount of time on naval bases to be familiar with such terms. This comment triggered another bout of laughter from Bobby and Susan. I might have smirked. Truth be told, I was laughing louder than any of them. Humor is humor. When the uproar subsided, I found myself just looking at Julian. Why are you staring at me like that? She asked, smiling. Yesterday, I mentioned, I suggested that I might need to discipline you, and it seems that situation is becoming a reality, young one. To which Julian responded, starting to speak before realizing Bobby and Susan were within hearing distance. Disregard, she stuttered, her face flushing bright red. What? What? Susan inquired curiously. Julian gave me a covert signal not to reveal anything. However, after the constant jesting at my expense, I decided to speak up. Yesterday, I said, Julian confessed she hadn't tried it before, but mentioned she had read 50 Shades of Grey and was willing to give it a try if I was. Now, the color had spread from Julian's cheeks to her ears, and even her hands. I leaned towards her for a quick kiss. However, the kiss seemed to last longer than intended, prompting Bobby to threaten us with ice water. Susan inquired about our current plans, to which I responded we were intending to grab breakfast and possibly shop afterward. I mentioned that Julian only had a small overnight bag with her clothes, and I didn't want her appearing disheveled. I then wiped a tear from her face tenderly. Upon this, Susan asserted she was taking Julian away with her as we went shopping after breakfast. She acknowledged that Julian wasn't great at shopping, but claimed she knew the best stores and authentic sales. She paused to smile. I also have plenty of tales about this Marine I need to share with you, she said, gesturing at me and recounting some of his humorous antics. This led to my concern, prompting me to ask Susan if she had ever told her that she was her favorite sister-in-law. You're my sole sister-in-law and intelligent, she retorted. Ah, we're in for such delightful conversation about you, Julian, she expressed, evidently eager to discuss me. Now I felt quite uneasy. The turn was Julian's. So, you and Sammy have collaborated for 2 years? Inquired Susan. That was following our order of breakfast from a nearby eatery, awaiting its arrival at our table. I confirmed with a nod. And for how long have the two of you been involved? She probed further. Since late yesterday afternoon, I replied. However, to be honest, I'm not entirely certain about the extent of our romantic involvement as of yet. Julian, she exclaimed, didn't you observe the way he gazes at you? His eyes sparkle whenever you speak. Well, yes, I conceded, but last night I mentioned my affection for him over a dozen times. I hesitated. And, Susan inquired. Nothing, I responded, subtly revealing my discontent in my tone. Susan asked, Ghost, was it? The movie where a man comes back as a spirit and doesn't explicitly say I love you, but always replies ditto. That's correct. I agreed. Later, she shared, You told Sammy you loved him, and he replied ditto a couple of times. Susan cautioned, Julian, remember that Sammy lost the only woman he ever truly loved. Perhaps he doubts if what he feels for you is genuine. Trust me, sweetheart, I can see uncertainty in his eyes, even though you might not. You have to acknowledge that Sammy is the one who brought you here, didn't he? I couldn't prevent tears from filling my eyes. Fortunately, the waitress arrived with our meal just in time before I had to respond. Prior to sitting down, I was famished. However, all I could manage was move the food around on my plate. Susan, I said, remember when I joked in the office about Sammy kidnapping me and bringing me here unwillingly? What I said then wasn't a joke. It was the truth. Sammy didn't want me here. When I asked him what our plans were for today, he responded, there is no way. My voice cracked at that point. That really hurt. He also informed me that I wouldn't be allowed near Helen. It wasn't until I repeatedly threatened to drive my own car up here that he finally agreed. The only reason I'm here is because I was such a nuisance that I forced him into bringing me. Susan, you replied, shaking your head, There is a lot about Sam that you need to understand. Let me make one thing clear. No one, and I mean no one, can compel the resolute Marine to perform an action he's unwilling to do. Now, could you recount everything that transpired yesterday, along with the events leading up to your presence here today? Yesterday couldn't be shared without discussing the day prior, when Sam's brother contacted us. My inadvertent revelation about Sammy being married to a Sports Illustrated swimsuit model to Janie, which quickly spread through the store. The subsequent phone call to the store manager for both of us to take the day off. Meeting Sammy in the parking lot and disclosing my indiscretion. His anger, my persistence for coffee, Sammy refusing to discuss Lauren after I brought her up, only to start talking about her later. Did Sam actually discuss Lauren with you? Susan asked, taken aback. Her voice echoed astonishment. For years, Bobby has been unwilling to discuss her, refusing even to utter her name aloud. I confided in Susan all that Sammy shared about their first encounter with Lauren. We chuckled over his ludicrous remarks about her age. He had asked her out for dinner, taken her dancing, embraced her, and eventually kissed her on the cheek. I divulged our stories of the rained-out photo shoot and their wager. Sammy revealed that upon seeing Lauren standing there, gazing over the ocean, he recognized his profound love for her. Even I admitted my comments about the dimensions of my chest, admitting it wasn't the first time such a remark had been made in front of Sam, and how upset he became when I compared myself to a dog, and how I then accused him of likening me to a canine. 1. Susan and I erupted in laughter at that moment. I recounted what he had said about the distinction between boys and men. She acknowledged this with a nod when I spoke of his narrative interruption to gaze at Lauren, clearly captivated by her. Susan burst out laughing again. Then I related Sammy's comment when Lauren asked about the long-awaited kiss. He wanted it to be a meaningful goodbye kiss, but she made it a welcome one instead. Lastly, I shared their silent, significant moment on the beach. "Good heavens, girl," Susan exclaimed, nearly shouting. "I can hardly believe he told you all that. You must be some kind of charm magnet." I concluded the story with the unconventional proposal, and then the unexpected pap smear appointment, and how Lauren passed away mere weeks before she was due to retire and start a family with him. Susan continued, shaking her head. "That's only about half of the unconventional proposal tale," she said. "However, before continuing with what follows, there are some details I must disclose initially. As I glanced at my plate, I was taken aback to find it empty. I hadn't realized I had eaten anything. Did you know that Bobby and I strongly objected to Lauren marrying Sam?" Susan posed the question, "Why?" I was astonished by her statement. After a brief pause, she spoke up. "It's hard to believe I'm sharing this with you, but I've known Lauren since she was around 8. My family moved to Helen and Bobby, and I went to the same high school. We spent our lunch hours together in the cafeteria, gradually moving on to afternoon visits at the hotel. By the time we were seniors, I frequently stayed with Bobby rather than returning home. His mother passed away that year, making Lauren approximately 10. Over time, I became like an older sister to her, sometimes even acting as a substitute mother. She wasn't any more lovable than if she were my sister or daughter." She exhaled deeply before continuing. "Initially, she modeled only locally, but soon a representative from Teen Magazine discovered her picture, leading to her gracing the cover. At 16, she began traveling worldwide for modeling gigs. This brought about an extravagant lifestyle, nightly parties, staying awake till dawn, consuming alcohol and drugs, as well as various partners. For 5 years, she lived this way. On her 23rd birthday, she overdosed and spent the next 3 months in a rehabilitation program for alcohol and substance abuse. When she returned, she was clean for the first time in years. I subtly nodded as Susan paused. Apparently, Lauren had confided in Sam that he was her first partner in over 2 years. I softly added. Eventually, Lauren called to inform us of her upcoming marriage. Susan continued without our knowledge of her relationship. Bobby inquired about the length of their acquaintance, to which she responded, "Only a week and a half." He was a Marine, Initially, Bobby and I believed she had relapsed given such a brief acquaintanceship for a potential spouse. We presumed he must be a towering, undereducated thug who somehow manipulated Lauren's thoughts. Perhaps he was targeting her wealth. This is one of the reasons I tried to intimidate Sam upon my first encounter with Bobby and him. I aimed to uncover his true nature. However, I was the one left embarrassed when I learned more about Sam. "Did you realize he holds 2 college degrees?" she inquired. I responded, "No, I wasn't aware of that." Sam, who often adopts a rugged persona and refers to himself as the son of a modest plumber, is actually quite articulate and thoughtful. However, this is precisely his biggest hurdle. He overthinks everything, including himself. Gently smiling, Susan said, "Knowing Sammy as I do, I can almost guarantee that he's currently calculating your ages somewhere. Julian is 25, and I'm 45. When she's 26, I'll be 46, and he'll continue this calculation for years. When you're 45, he'll be 65. When you're 50, he'll be 70. And when you're 60, he'll be 80. It's likely that he's already fretting over whether it's fair to ask you to commit to someone who might require care in the future." She leaned closer and allowed a moment for the idea to settle. Lastly, she advised, "Be sure to continue expressing your love for him." As if on cue, the waitress arrived to offer us more coffee. Susan and I chose apple pie with a serving of ice cream. Upon receiving our dessert, Susan continued from where we left off. "You were also informed that you only knew half the story about her nearly proposal," she stated. "Lauren told me all about it. She revealed that she had never been more terrified than the night when she confided in Sam everything about her past, parties, alcohol consumption, errors, and yes, multiple men." Susan's tone softened. According to Lauren, Sam remained silent during her narration. She mentioned that by the end, Lauren was crying. However, upon finishing, he lifted her up, kissed her more passionately than ever before, and expressed indifference towards her past. What she had done in the past didn't matter to him. What mattered was who she would be with in the future, and he hoped it would be him. Hearing this made my heart constrict. It was only when Lauren understood that Sam truly meant it, Susan said, that she fell on her knees and asked him to marry her. But Susan informed me, I interjected, "That's the crux of the matter." Lauren requested that he keep their proposal secret, and a commitment from Sam is as reliable as gold in a bank. "That's touching," I murmured, "but it must have been challenging for them to blend 2 contrasting lifestyles." I imply he remained in the Marines while she pursued modeling. "Perhaps not as difficult as you assume," Susan said with a smile. "Not when 2 individuals love each other deeply." She chuckled softly. "You're curious about how much Lauren loved Sam?" she asked. I nodded. After their 3-week honeymoon, Lauren had a photo shoot in London for a week, followed by a trip to Japan for another. After giving her some time to rest, I called to check on the newlyweds. But when she answered, Lauren was crying. Susan shook her head. I believed Sam had upset her because Lauren rarely cried without reason. I began to criticize him, assuming he'd caused her distress. However, she interrupted me angrily this time. She defended Sam vehemently. After composing herself, she clarified the events. She arrived in Charlotte, where Sam fetched her, and they journeyed back to Lejeune, his station. She dozed during the flight and wasn't overly fatigued. In the evening, they spent time together on more than one occasion before dozing off. However, her body clock was still set to Tokyo time, causing her to awaken in the middle of the night, fully alert. Tears filled Susan's eyes once more as she glanced at Sam, still asleep. She reached out and touched his chest, kissed her own hand, whispered, "I love you, Lauren," and resumed sleep. A moment passed before Susan spoke again, but the emotions in her eyes were palpable. "I endured," she admitted, followed by Lauren revealing that prior to meeting Sam, she believed love was a mere transaction. "I would love you if you did this, and you would love me if I did that." As she watched him sleep, she realized how profoundly, how enormously she had missed him for 2 weeks. She described her love for him as an actual ache in her heart. Susan chuckled gently once more. "Her next statement might seem odd, but it's beautiful," Susan mentioned. Lauren admitted that she had never truly known what love was before, and then continued, expressing that she no longer cared if Sammy scratched her back again because she would happily spend the remainder of her life scratching his instead. A few tears slid down her cheeks before she could respond. "That's incredibly beautiful," I told Susan, acknowledging its oddity but still appreciating its beauty. "And yes, I believe I understand what Lauren meant, especially when it comes to the ache you feel watching him sleep." Susan then shifted focus. "With breakfast finished," she started, "we need to discuss your situation." "What do you mean?" I inquired. "Dearest Julian," she said, her words causing my heart to flutter, "let me be utterly candid." "You're quite attractive, Julian," Susan remarked, yet she added, "but darling, even with all the makeup in existence, you can't match the beauty of Lauren." My complexion grew pale and tears welled up involuntarily. "Are you suggesting I'm not good enough for Sam?" I eventually asked. "That's not what I'm implying," Susan clarified. "Do you often apply as much makeup as you have today?" she questioned. Truth be told, I rarely did. Mostly, I went makeup-free, save for a touch of lip gloss. When she inquired why, I had to confess it was an attempt to impress Sam. "Julian," she stated, "there's only ever been one Lauren." She continued, "If you believe that by somehow imitating Lauren, you can become more attractive for Sam, you are making a grievous mistake. Granted, I'm no makeup expert, but Lauren did share her knowledge with me. You're overdoing the makeup, and the current style doesn't suit your hair color," I observed. "Sammy has feelings for an older version of you, though he might not be acknowledging it yet," she added. Moments ago, I was at my lowest ebb, even worse than discovering my fiancé cheating on me. However, after hearing your latest comments, my spirits are soaring high. "Do you truly believe this?" I asked softly, afraid to speak too loudly. "I don't just believe it, I know it," Susan responded. "Improvement is always possible." "Do you usually dress like this?" Susan inquired. I had to admit that the outfit I was wearing now was a step up from my usual attire. "Darling, I think we can transform you from Julian 1.0 to Julian 1.1, or perhaps Julian 1.2, depending on how much trust you place in me." "Perhaps even shoulder-length Julian," Susan mused with a grin. I found myself pondering for quite some time about what to say next. "Susan," I replied, "for the first time in my life, I'm entrusting both my life and physical appearance to someone else." Surprised, Susan asked if that included my hair as well. After a moment of contemplation, I agreed, even considering my long, waist-length tresses throughout my existence. Following hours of manicuring, pedicuring, Brazilian waxing it hurt. Having my hair styled and acquiring an entirely new wardrobe, the hairstyle was less dreadful than I had imagined. While significantly shorter, it still fell past my shoulders. The most unpleasant encounter might have been with a makeup artist. He actually gasped upon first sight, then flatly refused to look at me again until all the old makeup was removed. Once that was done, he did remark on my good bones. I suppose that's a positive thing. No one has ever complimented my bones before. The most challenging aspect of the encounter possibly lay in Susan's firm denial to let me see my current appearance by mirroring myself. Our disagreement extended first to the clothing expenses, but Susan, adamant that I was now family, enjoyed shopping for her nieces. She then asked me to be quiet. What took the most time to adjust to was almost every piece she chose accentuated a generous amount of cleavage. Although I might have accepted these clothes if I had something substantial to display in that department, they instead highlighted my limited resources in this regard. Of course, Susan had a different narrative about this, a story involving Lauren. When Lauren was around 22, she happened to visit Helen between modeling jobs. At that time, Susan found it challenging to go anywhere with Lauren when she was all dressed up, as she put it. Lauren questioned if people only noticed her due to her attire, makeup, and hairstyle. "Not at all," replied Susan. "You're beautiful regardless, but when you present yourself immaculately, everyone seems to take notice. It doesn't matter what you wear." "Tomorrow we're going shopping," Lauren informed Susan the next day. The following day, Susan observed that Lauren wore the most stunning clothes she had ever seen her in, disheveled hair and no makeup. According to Susan, it was the worst Lauren had ever looked. Susan held back her comments. Since there are no malls in Helen, they drove to the nearest big city with a mall. As they walked through the mall from one end to the other, very few people paid attention to Lauren, who seemed to be walking aimlessly. At the mall's exit, Lauren turned to Susan and said, "Observe and absorb, apprentice." Lauren stood tall, straightened her shoulders, and closed her eyes briefly. Susan observed her lips moving as she spoke words unheard. They then walked back. However, it seemed Lauren glided. By the halfway point, men were distracted, one even colliding with a concrete pillar. Susan was pointing and whispering. As they finished the mall, people, males and females alike, were covertly trailing them. When they returned to their car, Lauren turned to Susan and asked with a smirk, "Well, apprentice, did you learn anything today?" Naturally, the first question from Susan was about what Lauren had said before walking back through the mall. "Every man who sees you desires you, and every woman who sees you aspires to be like you," was Lauren's response. "Observe, Susan, I have been granted this appearance," Lauren explained. Lauren asserted, "I understand that, yet I've witnessed women who are naturally more stunning than me struggle in modeling. While appearance matters significantly, it is the inner qualities that truly matter." She added, "I'd prefer to be ordinary looking but possess a positive disposition inside, over being the most beautiful person in the world but lacking substance within." Susan remarked, "Julian, you truly are fortunate." "Indeed," she replied, "you only need to cater to one man's feelings. As for Sammy, he's not just looking anymore. I gather he's done much more based on the noises coming from your room." I reddened, agreed with a nod, and then answered her question. "Yes," I said. "He called them beautiful." "However, Susan," you declared, "I've known Sammy for a considerable time, and I can honestly say I've never seen him fabricate anything." Admittedly, apart from the ambiguous proposal that was due to a vow, and based on your account of his words, it seems he skirted the truth rather than flat-out lied. "Indeed, I find myself astounded by you," she persisted. "You asserted that Sammy initially didn't wish to discuss Lauren." "Correct," I confirmed. "In fact, he did want to discuss Lauren, but only with someone he not only feels strongly for, but cherishes dearly even if he himself isn't fully aware of it. And you stated he didn't want you present, yet here you are. You weren't coerced into his presence, rather, you chose to be here. If there's one thing I hope you take away from my words today, it's this: Sammy did not prevent your arrival. If Sammy chose not to discuss Lauren, it meant both of you would have remained in that restaurant for an additional day and a half, still anticipating his words. Had he wished for your absence, you'd be seated in his truck instead. No force, not even the strongest, could compel that Marine to act against his will. Tears welled up in my eyes until Susan intervened with another topic. She warned she'd reprimand me if I ruined my makeup crying, and threatened to put me over her knee for a spanking. As expected, Susan had more to say, which I didn't appreciate as much as I would with Sam. My face flushed red. Eventually, I conceded to most of Susan's fashion choices. She even made me wear an extravagant dress on the way back to the hotel. The dress fell significantly below my mid-thigh, barely reaching halfway between my knees and hips. Its neckline dipped perilously close to my navel. Upon Susan's permission, I finally got a glimpse of myself in the mirror. "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, who is this person staring back at me?" I can't tell how long I stood there, transfixed, I recollected. I twisted and turned, attempting to observe myself from different angles. "Beautiful, isn't she?" Susan murmured. Struggling to respond, I managed a soft, "Yes." For the first time ever, I genuinely felt more than just somewhat attractive or acceptable attractive, but truly stunning. The thought of uttering the word beautiful for myself was almost overwhelming. Susan suggested we might see not Julian 1.0, but perhaps Julian 1.2 or 1.3. Even after being advised to aim for Julian 1.5, I never imagined we could strive for Julian 2.0. Visualize what Susan conveyed regarding your partner, Sammy. Contemplate how he may react upon seeing you. Fixated on the mirror and recollecting Susan's tale about Lauren, I silently mumbled to myself, "When Sammy sees you, he will desire you. When Sammy sees you, he will desire you. When Sammy sees you, he will desire you." As these words resonated within me, my stance altered. I had always been somewhat self-conscious of my height, resulting in slouching. However, as I corrected my posture, my shoulders straightened naturally and I stood taller. For the first time, I appreciated my appearance. Over the years, I'd chosen clothing to conceal my figure, avoiding drawing attention to it. Yet, in this dress, initially hesitated about I perceived myself differently. It accentuated my physique in a novel manner, but instead of discomfort, I felt an unfamiliar sense of assurance. In the past, I constantly measured myself against others, always discovering a deficiency. However, at this very moment, I felt fulfilled, even pleased with myself. Instead of walking back to the hotel, I drifted. It wasn't until a man tripped on a curb that my attention was diverted, only for Susan to inform me he had been staring at me. She texted Bobby, indicating we were on our way, followed by her own chuckle at his response. Bobby complained that Sammy was driving him up the wall, infuriatingly so, with incessant questions about where I was, when I'd return, and what was taking so long. Laughing, she revealed that even threats had been made. Upon entering the lobby, both Bobby and Sammy were present. Sam stared at me, then at Susan, before asking bewilderedly, "Where's Julie Ann? What have you done with July?" His questioning halted abruptly as he turned back to me, his jaw dropping open, eyes widening like saucers. Unable to suppress my laughter, I observed his lips move, but no words emerged. It seemed that the roles had reversed, Susan said. I thought I was going crazy. 6 hours passed since Julie Ann went to get breakfast and shop for clothes. I checked my watch repeatedly. They had been gone almost 6 hours. It seemed odd for such simple tasks to take so long. Perhaps they enjoyed a leisurely meal, which would still leave them ample time to shop. It wasn't until they were away for a couple of hours that I realized how much I already missed Julie Ann, how eager I was to hold her hand, embrace her, long to kiss her again, cherish that moment forever. In the end, I called Bobby and told him I needed to run an errand quickly, but requested he inform me if Susan and Julie Ann returned. I made a rather costly purchase, more than just expensive. Still, they hadn't returned. My brother-in-law refused to text Susan to inquire about the delay. Susan told me she'd return when she did, and I was to avoid bothering them until contacted. Despite my threats, he persisted. At last, a text arrived from Susan saying she and Julie Ann were returning. I debated who to eliminate first, Susan or Bobby. Suddenly, the door opened and in walked a stunning redhead, followed by my soon-to-be deceased sister-in-law. Susan shut the door. "Where is Julie Ann?" I asked, but my question was cut short when I realized the beautiful redhead was Julie Ann herself. If my jaw didn't drop to the floor, it came close. Yes, I knew her beauty, even if she always downplayed it, and I had often thought how much more beautiful she could be with some attention to her appearance. One can't spend years married to a supermodel without grasping some insights into how makeup and attire collaborate to fashion a style that accentuates natural beauty. As the old saying goes, you can't change a sow's ear into a silk purse, but if you start with a silk purse, you can certainly add a few pearls or a gold chain. But this woman? This isn't embellishment, it's transformation. If I harbored the tiniest doubt, I knew she was someone I desired to spend the rest of my life with. Speech escaped me initially. I stumbled over my words multiple times before uttering anything. Eventually, I whispered her name, Julie Ann. She acknowledged with a nod, smile, and laughter. Indeed, it's her. Once more, Julie Ann was in my embrace, our lips meeting, when again my brother-in-law warned of dousing us with ice water for the second time that day. "Find a private space, for goodness sake," he instructed. "We already have one," Julie Ann retorted. "Suggest your other guests use earplugs or similar." She scolded Jack before we departed the lobby. "That's my woman," he said. Later, I realized perhaps I should have been the one using earplugs. If I thought Julie Ann had expressed herself loudly the day prior, well, that was insignificant compared to the triple expressions of our affection that afternoon. Whenever we weren't together, I continued to tell Julie how breathtaking she was, admiring every single aspect of her beauty and expressing my deep affection for every part of her touch and kiss. After our third lovemaking session and hearing Julie Ann's growling stomach, we eventually got up and dressed to seek food outside. I insisted Julie Ann don the same dress she wore upon her return from shopping. "I can't help but remark on how stunning you appear in this gown," I stated. "What? Just this old thing," she replied, yet her ear-to-ear smile betrayed her affection for the compliment. Upon entering the lobby, the receptionist grinned at us. I assumed an older couple likely had misconstrued our actions. Julie Ann blushed. We savored a delightful meal, followed by an hour-long stroll around town before returning to our room. Upon our return, I recognized that I hadn't charged my phone in 2 days. While Julie Ann was in the bathroom changing out of her dress, I retrieved the charger from my overnight bag and connected it. When Julie Ann re-entered, dressed in shorts and a chic top that flattered her, I inquired about her phone charging. She looked suddenly pale and murmured, "Oh dear." This was one of the rare instances where I heard Julie Ann respond in such a manner. At the workplace, following an encounter with an aggravating client, she might remark about being treated rudely or annoyingly, occasionally employing mild exclamations like "dang" or "darn," but seldom anything more severe. I inquired about her well-being straight away, to which she responded that during our drive into town when I stopped for gas and beverages, and after she had called Bobby to alter the reservations to a single occupancy room, she had turned off her phone. "I had an idea of what I wanted to transpire upon our arrival," she admitted, blushing immediately. I found myself growing fond of her blushing response and wished to avoid any interruptions. She then blushed even more before adding further, "Once I discovered your exceptional quality as a partner, I didn't even think about my phone anymore," she continued with a wide grin on her face. "Exceptional," I insisted. Julian chuckled. "Absolutely extraordinary, incredibly, amazingly, astonishingly exceptional," she replied, smiling mischievously. "Never have I imagined something more wondrous." Soothed slightly by this, Julian further alleviated my emotions with a kiss that made me disregard everything she had recently mentioned. Julian picked up her overnight bag, fetched her phone, and activated it. It seemed to beep, buzz, vibrate, and ring for 5 minutes straight. As Julian scrolled through her calls and texts, she muttered softly, "Oh no, oh no, oh no." She explained that, as far as she could gather, her father had called around the time we reached town. "I usually call him back within a few minutes," she added. When she didn't return his call, he dialed again. Then, 15 minutes later, a third time. She was also reading through all the text messages. When I didn't return his call, he eventually contacted the store. They informed him that I had called in sick due to an emergency. Then, he truly started calling and texting repeatedly. 15 missed calls and 25 unread texts from her dad, all unanswered by Julian. Swiftly typing a message to Frank, she informed him that she was all right, merely forgetting her phone was switched off. Informing him she'd call shortly. She knew she needed to call him now. Worry etched on her face, but she was unsure of how to inform him about us. Unaware of Julian's feelings, he seemed to be aware judging by his recent conversation with me. This revelation made her laugh. When Julian inquired as to the cause of my laughter, I shared the entire dialogue between Frank and me while she tidied up around the house. At certain moments over the next 10-15 minutes, Julian's mouth would gape in shock. Her cheeks would redden with embarrassment at times. "He told you that?" she questioned at some points, also flushing for other reasons. "I can't believe he said that. I'll have a word with him when I get the chance." When I shared with her what her father said regarding range, windage, and crosshairs, as well as his boast about shooting a rifle at me, she laughed. "I never thought he knew all that," she remarked. "I believed I was effectively masking my feelings towards you." I also conveyed to her what her father had said about knowing her better than anyone else. Guess he does, she conceded. Now I have to contact him. Oh dear, he's going to be furious with me, Julian said. Then a thought struck me. Why do you appear so puzzled, Sam? Julian questioned. Sammy, you have an unusual expression on your face, she added. When you call your father on his cell and he recognizes it's you, how does he respond? Typically, hi, darling, or hi, love, something along those lines, she replied. Place your phone on speaker and dial him, I instructed her. Then don't utter a word. Hello, where are you, sweetheart? Her father responded, which we could hear. Are you all right? I've been extremely concerned about you, dear. Wow, Frank, I retorted. You seemed unaware of my feelings towards you since you never contact me, neither by phone, nor written word, nor through gifts. Julian was struggling to contain her laughter upon hearing this. After a brief pause, the phone nearly shattered due to Frank's subsequent remarks. Sam, you devil, he exclaimed. Why on earth do you have my daughter's phone, and where on earth is my daughter? Julian and I burst into giggles. Eventually, Julian managed to gasp, Dad, it's me. Where on earth are you? He inquired sharply. We're in town, Dad, she replied. Sam repeated himself, emphasizing the first word. We are in town, Dad, at a hotel with me. Are you all right, dear? Frank asked softly all of a sudden. Are you truly all right? Better than I have ever been in my life, Dad, she answered. Then I believed it prudent to express myself using words that Frank could easily comprehend. Frank, please understand your daughter is an exceptional marksman, I stated. The woman is proficient in rifle shooting. A pause ensued on the call. Moments later, we heard Frank say her name, Julian. His voice cracked as he spoke. We could hear Julian ask softly, Daddy, are you crying? To which Frank replied, feigning nonchalance, just my allergies acting up. After discussing travel plans and setting a dinner date, Frank expressed concern for her safety with the Marine, to which she joked about hiding places where he could be disposed of. She assured him that she had already chosen spots to dispose of his remains if necessary. This statement raised an eyebrow. Julian is well versed in shooting at the rifle range. There was a momentary silence over the phone before Frank uttered her name. Hearing the crack in his voice, we could tell he was emotional and asked, Daddy, are you crying? To which he replied dismissively, just my allergies. After discussing travel plans and arranging for dinner, she assured him of her ability to take care of a man who might cause trouble by suggesting several locations where he could be disposed of without a trace. This statement left me taken aback. Eventually, it was clear our chat was wrapping up, yet I felt compelled to share something with Frank. Frank, I started, speaking while Julian listened. Although you can't see us, I'm here with Julian and I have a statement to make. Frank, I joked, it's not about you, it's about me. I hope we remain friends, despite your military background, I added. Frank retorted, but his amusement was audible. When I meet you again, I'll hit you square in the head with a baseball bat, he threatened. Frank continued to hurl insults at me, even at one point casting doubt on whether my parents were actually together when I was born. For the record, they were. Post-call, I had to ask Julian something. You mentioned already selecting locations for disposing of the remains, I said with a smirk. I suspect there are some facts about my dad you may not know, she replied. Hadn't your father mentioned that he was part of the Navy team that clinched the Inter-Service Rifle Team Championship at Quantico? I knew it was one of the toughest global shooting competitions hosted at Marine Corps Base Quantico, Virginia. I began to respond, no, that didn't come up, but Julian interrupted. Did he also fail to mention that he lost the individual championship by a single point? She inquired. Before I could reply, Julian continued, he neglected to say as well that when I was 8, he started taking me to the shooting range, and by 12, I had mastered both rifle and pistol. For the following 6 years, my father and I competed in shooting tournaments across the country. It seemed there were several details he hadn't shared. Before I could speak again, Julian interjected a third time. I have a room full of championship trophies at my place, as well as one at my father's, she disclosed. And Sam, who is my beloved and eternal partner, She paused, implying he was her husband. Affirmatively, child, I replied, somewhat uncertainly. Your father and I have always been flawless in our actions. Consider this as a point of reflection. Darling, she concluded with an utterly innocent and guileless expression. A while later, I inquired casually from Julian if she had received any news from her ex-fiancé or her former best friend. I felt relieved when her countenance turned contemplative. No, no, I haven't heard from either, she said. I have no idea where they might be. Then she flashed a blameless, earnest, and innocent smile and suggested, if you're curious, I could inquire from my dad about their whereabouts. I mean, if he knows something. No, no, it's not required, child, I told Julian. I suspected she was joking, merely teasing me, but I preferred to remain oblivious to the truth. By now, it was becoming dusk, but we both wished to walk. We wandered the streets of Helen for approximately 30 minutes before heading back to the hotel. I felt it was the right moment. Julian, I started, I have something to ask you. Simultaneously, Julian said, Sam, I have something to tell you. We chuckled, and I deferred, letting her speak first. Sam, she said, when we arrived here, I didn't know what to anticipate. I knew what I desired, but I never expected it to be this remarkable. I now comprehend that the feelings I considered love in the past were worthless compared to what I feel for you now. I want you to realize, Sam, my dear one, there's no need for you to massage my back, but I will always be here to massage yours. After a lengthy pause, Julian inquired, so, what are your thoughts? You don't mind if I massage your back, I replied, eventually asking, right? Sam, Julian clarified, you don't grasp it yet, but I adore it when you massage my back. Essentially, Julian explained that since she now knows how deeply she loves you, there's no need for you to ever scratch her back, but she will always return the favor. To ensure I grasped her correctly, I paraphrased and asked if my understanding was correct. So, in other words, Juz, because you know how much you love me, there's no obligation for me to scratch your back, but you'll always do it for me. Is that the gist? Julian responded with a radiant smile. Yes, Sam, you get it. She then rewarded me with a kiss so passionate, it left me nearly breathless. Though I didn't comprehend most of her words, her affectionate gesture more than made up for it. Now, Sam, she said after our previous exchange, I have a question for you. You may have taken a moment to respond. All right, Juz, I eventually replied. I too have something to ask of you. Earlier, I told you how deeply I love you, Sam Johnson, a depth of love I never knew was possible. I wish to spend the rest of my life with you by my side. Then she dropped to one knee. Sam, will you marry me? Once again, I found myself being asked for my hand in marriage. After Lauren shared her past struggles, the parties, the substance abuse, and yes, the relationships, and then revealed her overdose and brushes with death, I came to understand that the past didn't matter to me. What mattered was us. The future was all that truly concerned me. Admittedly, I was still apprehensive about the kind of future I could provide for Lauren, but I knew I wanted her in my future. I intended to buy an engagement ring and propose to Lauren the following day, but she surprised me by proposing instead that night. After Julian and Susan departed in the morning, I pondered our age gap, then spent more time contemplating how extraordinary the past day and night had been. With their absence seemingly endless, I also missed Julian profoundly and desired her presence in my life forever. Age discrepancy no longer mattered. Upon leaving and telling Bobby that I needed to run an errand, I secretly bought an engagement ring, planning to propose to Julian later that evening once she finished. I intended to ask for Julian's hand in marriage. What could I do? I hadn't mentioned the ring or my proposal plans to anyone. Instead, I responded with the most heartfelt answer possible to her question. FedEx's former motto was, when it absolutely, positively has to be delivered overnight. Now, the Marines have modified it, when it absolutely, positively has to be annihilated overnight. That was more or less what I informed Julian. Yes, completely, yes, 1,000 times yes and no. The image of Julian's room filled with championship shooting trophies, her mentioning specific disposal locations, and her flawless aim never truly crossed my mind. Well, not really. As Julian later expressed her affection for me, I attempted to remind myself to get some earplugs or the like. Goodness, she is vocal. Yet, I adore it. To be honest, I'm unsure of how many times we made love that night. We simply couldn't resist each other, our lips and tongues, not just that, but other parts as well. The following day, upon waking, I recognized it was almost 9, an unusual time for me to rise given our encounter the previous night at around 5 am. Typically, I wake much earlier. Attempting to rouse my charming Jules, though, was met with a threat of violence if I disturbed her slumber. It appears my soon-to-be bride isn't fond of mornings. This unexpected delay afforded me an opportunity. I quickly showered, dressed, then penned a love note to Julian using the hotel stationery and placed it on my pillow. Inquiring about Bobby and Susan with the desk clerk, he informed me both were in Bobby's office. Stepping inside, I could only gaze at Susan momentarily. "What?" she asked, repeating her query. "I struggled to express this, Susan," I started. "I'm not sure how or what you influenced in Julian yesterday, but thank you. I believe a few tears may have been present." I clarified, "I don't mean the physical transformations alone. From the start, I sensed Julian was more than just attractive, but seeing it now leaves me speechless. Yet, the physical transformation pales in comparison to yesterday's and last night's Julian. Today's Julian, I struggle to put into words. She exudes a tranquility and ease, and perhaps content is the most fitting description. In essence, Susan proposed, our dear Julian has found her comfortable with her appearance, comfortable in her own skin. Exactly, I nearly shouted. She's comfortable with herself. How did you manage that, Susan? Manage it, she smiled. Well, part of it was convincing her that your seemingly uncaring behavior on Monday was actually unacknowledged love. Sam, Susan murmured gently. I realize you don't wish to discuss Lauren, but you did express your feelings about her, didn't you? After recognizing the depth of her emotional burden and turmoil within, Julian confided in you. She entrusted you with her feelings, but regrettably, like in an ancient ballad, you shattered her heart instead of cherishing it. What on earth are you discussing, Susan? I questioned. I didn't do anything of the sort. Do you understand how difficult it was for her to open up to you? How will we spend the rest of the day? This situation suggests a bond between two individuals. This situation implies that one of them is harboring affection. And what was your reaction when she seemingly declared her affection for you? There's no us, Julian. Do you realize how much that pained her? It didn't deter her, but it caused great hurt. You won't be accompanying me, whether we're going somewhere or staying in the same hotel, with Helen. Despite her heartache, she persisted, and it wasn't because of any other reason but her love for you. Among the women I've encountered, Julian is one of the few who wouldn't have given up. She held on because she loved you. Yesterday morning in this office, when I saw the two of you and witnessed the look in your eyes, I realized you were in love with her, even if you hadn't acknowledged it yet. My task was simply to make her understand the depth of your feelings. Once that was achieved, it's not about new clothes, hairstyles, or makeup. When you gaze upon Julian now, what you see is her love for you. I remained silent for a while before saying, "Thank you, Susan. I appreciate your presence when Julian and I required your help." Susan, being myself, made a joke saying, "Have I ever told you that you're my favorite sister-in-law?" To which she replied with a broad grin, "You only have one sister-in-law, goofball." Then I addressed Bobby. "I'm about to give your wonderful wife a grand, possibly spinning hug. If Sammy Johnson approaches me, he might receive a black eye," Susan cautioned, blushing slightly. "I enjoy a good contest," I teased, extending my arms and advancing towards her. Susan let out a playful shriek and hid behind Bobby's desk, giggling. I exited the office still smiling broadly when I entered the jewelry store where I had purchased the ring. Upon entering, the same elderly clerk was at the counter. "Hello," he said. "Aren't you the one who came in yesterday to buy an engagement ring?" I informed him that I had been there, and he remarked, "Judging by your smile, The ring seems to have done its job. I admitted we were betrothed, but there was more to it than that. I then presented a small box containing the ring and asked him to keep it for a while. Later, when my fiancé and I returned, he was to act as if selling it back to me. He seemed surprised, then looked at my marine care cap. I hadn't worn it the day before. I was about to ask if you were insane or foolish, and it appears that Cap answers both those questions, he said. I take it, I guessed, you served in either the Army or Navy. He sat up straighter and declared, actually, I spent 23 years in the U.S. Coast Guard. Recalling his jest about my cap suggesting I was both crazy and stupid, I looked at him and said, apparently, you secured a waiver for the height requirement, as you don't appear to be 6 feet tall. Now listen, Sonny, he retorted, referring to an old joke from 45 years ago. The joke wasn't amusing back then and has since lost any appeal. I expressed my apologies and clarified that my fiancée desired to select her own engagement ring, which necessitated us guiding her towards the one I had already bought. I saw no reason to elaborate on how my fiancée proposed to me. She was unaware of my visit here yesterday and purchasing this ring, I mentioned as an aside. He relaxed and guaranteed he would assist in directing my fiancée to the appropriate ring. This is indeed a stunning ring, and among the better ones available, he commented, at least compared to those displayed here. It took me almost an hour to return to the hotel. Upon arrival, Julian was waiting for me. "Oh, Sam," she said, "your initial love letter to me is exquisite." We ended up spending another hour in the room. "Allow me to recall those earplugs," Julian requested. After having an early lunch, we proceeded to walk towards the jewelry store. The man I had interacted with yesterday was amiable but somewhat aloof. However, due to our minor misunderstanding regarding military heritage earlier that day, he seemed less cordial. Yet, when Julian entered, his demeanor noticeably brightened. "If I've ever seen two people more in love than you two," he exclaimed, "I just can't recall it." Julian was delighted by this comment. Then, directing his question towards me, he asked, "Were you in the Marines? As a veteran myself, I appreciate assisting fellow veterans." "What branch were you in?" Julian inquired. With an air of pride, he replied, "I served for 23 years in the United States Coast Guard." One could hear his sense of accomplishment in his tone. "Bobby and Sammy informed me yesterday about the height requirements for the Coast Guard," Julian mentioned, her eyes sparkling. "What did y'all call them?" she asked. "The Naval Service for shallow waters requires individuals to be at least 6 feet tall." This fact was apparently shared by Bobby, not Sam, who also informed me that the Coast Guard deems a long-term deployment as overnight stays aboard the vessel. The jeweler, in agreement with a tight smile, confirmed he had endured multiple extended deployments, labeling them the worst 48 hours of his life. All these remarks were directed at you, and Julian wasn't being unaware or playful. She was deliberately taunting you. You could see amusement in her eyes and a particularly mischievous smile on her face when you tried to gesture for her to halt. "You might also recognize Bobby," Julian went on, then named the hotel. "Yes, I'm quite acquainted with Bobby," the jeweler replied. "I'm eagerly anticipating a private conversation with good old Bobby at our upcoming American Legion gathering." Despite my attempts to guide Julian towards looking at rings, she seemed intent on avoiding it. "Sweetheart," I eventually urged, "take a look at these stunning rings." Finally, Julian leaned over the display case. Check out that one in the back, tucked away in its own protective case," she noted. "Isn't it lovely? I have no doubt our friend Artie can inform us about its quality." "Correct, Artie?" "Well, to be honest, Sam," he said, "those are not high-quality stones. I understand a valiant, courageous, and considerate Marine like you wouldn't compromise for anything less than the best for his beloved. Certainly not someone as stunning as this one. You store the finest items in a secure vault within the storage area, and you'd like to show them. It seems to me the temperature here has abruptly risen. Quite substantially, I might add." "Of course, Artie," I replied, trying to maintain my most charming smile. I always ensure the best for Julian, after all. What other purpose is there? Although Julian was still perusing her choices, Artie kept casting mischievous glances in my direction, almost sinister in nature. When Julian inquired about the price of certain rings, Artie had a ready response. Well, he said, there are numerous traditions associated with weddings, such as the groom never seeing the bride's gown before the ceremony. Julian nodded in agreement. It's considered extremely unlucky for the bride to ask about the cost of her engagement ring, he continued solemnly. Just trust that the expense of these rings is virtually insignificant compared to the affection this exceptional Marine has for you. Essentially, the new ring was 5 times as expensive as the old one, and Artie provided full credit for the return of the initial ring, minus a 10% fee. Following our departure from the jeweler, Julian was on the verge of uncontrollable laughter within just a few steps. "Oh God, Sam," she panted, "you should have seen your face when I mentioned the Coast Guard's height requirements. It was priceless. And when I repeated what you said about long-term deployments, and he added that the worst 48 hours of his life were spent on a boat, I thought you were going to faint. I know how much your father detests people calling it a boat. I assumed the Coast Guard would feel the same way." Then she grew serious. "Sam, my dear, why was he being so cordial after enduring so many insults? You've been to that store before, right? As a rule, I don't lie. On occasion, it's necessary to distort truth slightly, telling a small untruth to protect feelings or honor a vow of secrecy. This practice is also known as prevarication, which means evading the truth, being vague, or delaying an answer to avoid directness. Just like with the jeweler when he asked if the ring functioned, I practiced prevarication with Julian. Unfortunately, it didn't work on her. She continued to inquire. Eventually, I confessed the truth, that I had purchased the engagement ring yesterday and intended to propose last night, but she had beaten me to it. I returned the ring to the jeweler this morning while she was sleeping, and we attempted to get her to choose that particular ring. "Oh, Sam," she murmured, tears welling up in her eyes, "I never realized how close you were. Yesterday, Susan told me that you might be grappling with emotions concerning me, the age gap, and required some space. I adore you immensely, Sam. I merely wanted to ease your burden a little. She suggested we could return the ring for a less costly one, but I responded, 'No, no, dear, the ring is flawless, just like its wearer.' I was taken aback by her cunning nature. I asked when she had started developing this trait. After a brief pause, she replied, 'Perhaps for the past 2 years, since I encountered that Marine with a combination of foolishness and intelligence who constantly ridiculed me.' I paused, confused, then questioned, 'How can I be both foolish and intelligent?' She chuckled, her eyes gleaming. 'As a Marine, you are all in. That means you embody a paradox.' Jokingly, I threatened to administer a playful spanking once we returned to our room, right there on the busy street, under the bright daylight. Susan tenderly held me, neglecting only a small part she had recently grown fond of. She moved closer, enfolded me in her arms, placed her lips to my ear, and shared her plans for that specific area when we returned to our room. It's clear Julian possesses a vivid imagination. Our walk back seemed to take longer due to the unusual circumstances. However, the ring she wore gleamed even more stunning with it being the only adornment. We eventually succumbed to exhaustion later in the night, following our return to our room. As promised, Julian fulfilled every word whispered to me earlier. We enjoyed a serene dinner before retiring, and once more, we conveyed our love for each other through intimate gestures. Waking up in the middle of the night, I found Julian asleep on my shoulder, her head resting against mine, and an arm and leg entwined with my body. Quietly so as not to awaken her, I slid from our bed and moved towards the bathroom, flicking on the light. Leaving the bathroom door slightly open, I allowed a faint light to bathe the room upon my return. I snuggled up beside Julian once more under its gentle illumination, simply observing her sleep. In days past, I used to watch Lauren sleep in similar fashion, finding tranquility and beauty in her slumber. The memory of Lauren stirred a poignant longing within me. I yearned for her so much. My affection for her remained profound, and I knew it always would. Yet, I was also aware of another crucial truth. My undying love for Lauren didn't detract from my feelings for Julian in the least. It struck me then, or perhaps it was merely an imaginative thought, that the human heart's ability to love could be one of the most unending resources on earth. Contemplating Julian as she slumbered, harboring an intense and constant affection for her, yet simultaneously clinging to my love for Lauren, I acknowledged the truth, albeit unfair. As thoughts of these two extraordinary women swirled in my mind, I couldn't help but contrast them. My beloved Julian possessed a quiet beauty, not one that would captivate strangers, but a luminous radiance to me. In contrast, Lauren embodied a beauty that seemed almost supernatural, otherworldly, a type of beauty that is rare in a generation. I was fortunate to have been graced with such beauty for 4 unforgettable years. The beauty Julian conveyed, though more subdued, held no less potency. It felt profound, almost intimately so. Lauren's beauty appeared as if it belonged to the world at large. In contrast, Julian's beauty seemed intended solely for me. I continued to gaze at Julian until her eyes finally fluttered open. She glanced at me, then tenderly brushed away tears from my face. "You're crying," she murmured, her voice brimming with worry. "I understand, child, I understand," I whispered back. Without asking for an explanation, she did not pry. Perhaps she already comprehended that I wouldn't be capable of expressing those feelings verbally. Instead, she extended a reassuring hand on my shoulder. I continued to grip the break room door, engrossed in thought, while listening to Julie being questioned about the supposed mystery man. As she would say, I had zoned out again, lost in the reminiscences of the recent days and weeks. Taking a deep breath, I shoved the door open and stepped inside. The instant Bethany noticed me, she eagerly approached. "Thank goodness you're here, Sam," she started. "You and Julian are friends. Perhaps she'll tell you who this man is that she's been with. Go ahead, inquire." "Sam," I heard myself say as soon as I saw Julian. A smile spread across my face, stretching from ear to ear. Julian's grin widened noticeably. Undeniably, it seemed anyone observing us at that moment would have guessed our relationship was romantic. Somewhat incoherently, Bethany repeated Sam, then Julian. It was followed by more exclamations of surprise and questions about my sister Janie before she exited the break room in search of her. I paid no heed. I strided towards Julian and embraced her tightly. Earlier, I'd shared our relationship with Clinton, as well as submitting our resignation, though there'd be some paperwork to sign. Previously, upon returning from Helen, Clinton had asked if I could cover the night shift instead of my scheduled afternoon one. Since Julian was already on her shift, she had been working for 4 hours by the time I arrived. During our drive back from Helen, Julian and I had discussed various topics, including my financial situation, as Lauren had left me a substantial sum in her will, which allowed me to work less. After realizing my mistake, there was no requirement for work. Yet, following Lauren's demise, I experienced intense longing for her. Without the structured schedule and the diversion of managing the motor pool, I turned to alcohol. Initially, it was just a little, but it gradually became excessive. The consequence was a Dewey. The judge mandated me to undergo alcohol therapy. My counselor recommended finding employment or a pastime to keep my mind occupied. Wilson's home improvement met that demand during daylight hours. Lauren had left me substantial property, much of which she jointly bequeathed to Bobby and me, including her beachfront condo in Hawaii, the destination for our upcoming month-long honeymoon with Julian. I also inquired about Julian's feelings regarding children. She expressed a desire for many kids. When I asked about the timing, she smiled and replied, "As soon as we return home." Her response and the woman behind it were endearing to me. Julian had already ceased taking her daily birth control pills. Our wedding was scheduled for exactly 1 month from then. In conclusion, there's one more conversation I'd like to discuss that transpired between me and Susan before Julian and I returned to Marietta. The four of us, myself, Julian, Bobby, and Susan, were strolling down Main Street in Helen. Bobby and Susan were linked arm in arm, as were Julian and I. At one instance, Bobby gestured for Julian to examine a shop window display. I signaled for Susan to carry on walking with me until we were about 10 feet from them. In a quiet tone, I posed a few queries to Susan. You and Julian seemed quite engaged yesterday, I remarked. Susan confirmed this. I suppose at some point, the two of you switched topics from me to other subjects. What makes you believe we even discussed you? Susan retorted, raising an eyebrow. Knowing Susan's fondness for country music and her affection for Randy Travis, I inquired about his song lyrics. Can you recall the words sung by Randy Travis? I asked, flashing a small smile. You caught me grinning. Are you labeling Julian an old woman? Susan questioned, her eyes flashing like knives. Not Julian, I countered, my smile widening. At times, you can be quite annoying, she retorted, shaking her head. Come on, Susan, I pressed further. This has been bothering me since last night. Frankly, it's been nagging at me. Swift problem, she quipped dryly. I gave her a mock scowl before asking, did Julian mention anything about disliking people scratching her back during your time together yesterday? Susan stared at me as if I'd sprouted an extra limb. Then she called me foolish and left to rejoin Bobby and Julian, who were still examining something in the store window. I simply stood there for a moment, shaking my head. I suddenly recalled a piece of advice about what makes a marriage successful. In alignment with the quote, a woman should love a man moderately but comprehend him greatly, while a man is expected to love a woman profoundly yet not strive for understanding. Reflecting this, Julian and I appear to be destined for an unprecedentedly prosperous union. She has already gained considerable insight into me, and it's not merely that she adores me slightly, but her affection runs deep. On the other hand, I am yet to grasp the intricacies of the back-scratching conundrum or matter, whatever it may be. I am utterly baffled about it, unable even to comprehend what I fail to understand. If there's any clarity in my words, I acknowledge that I'll never fathom Julian entirely, and that's acceptable because my profound love for her surpasses all else. And yes, I shall continue to massage her back until she instructs me to desist.